Lurking Fears, a collection of short horror stories by Hannah Davis. Accessibility. A free-to-view version of this text will be linked in the description below. Stories in this collection. Introduction. I understand. From below. Tick-tock. The Green Lady. Alone. Shadowed. Escapism. Last night. Introduction. Throughout my teenage years, after growing up terrified of it, I fell in love with the horror genre. I loved how it often didn't take itself seriously, the atmosphere that surrounded it, and the kind of fans it had. It usually scared me half to death, sure, but it also brought me a sense of comfort. It helped me think in ways I wouldn't have otherwise and allowed me to discover new things about myself. I've also always wanted to be a storyteller. As I got older and people began to ask what I was going to do with my life, I always told them I wanted to be an author. I often said that because I couldn't think of anything else, but it was still pretty true. The issue was, I never practiced writing. But when I discovered horror, I felt a little more motivated. I still wasn't pumping out novels, but for the first time I was writing short stories and the beginnings of longer ones. Something about the genre made it easier, more fun. So here I am today with my first collection of completed, polished stories. I've had a mostly good, hell of a time writing them, and I hope you enjoy reading them. I hope they can bring you the same kind of joy and wonder that horror brings me. Story 1. I understand. She flipped under the covers for what felt like the millionth time that night. As she stared blankly at the street lamp light that slipped through the blinds and onto the ceiling, she wished more than anything that she could fall asleep. She also wished she could blame her wakefulness on the stiff hotel bed or her mother's roaring snores, but she knew that wasn't the case. She had first seen it on the night they had arrived at the Paradise Resort, an odd name for a hotel nowhere near any place tropical. They were just returning from getting dinner after unpacking the car, walking down the hallway of the first floor towards the elevator. She was trailing behind her parents, tuning out the discussion that obviously didn't involve her. She was looking at the doorways as they passed, vaguely registering their names mounted on adjacent plaques. Conference room, game room, office, supply closet. Overall, pretty boring stuff. But then it caught her eye. There really wasn't anything special about it. It was just another door, except its label looked like it had been scratched off. She had turned her head to peek through its partial opening, seeing only some empty desks and chairs in the dimness. It looked like some room that the hotel didn't have a use for anymore. But something about the place unnerved her. She had thought about it over the drone of her parents' conversation as they rode up to their floor. It had been in the back of her mind the entire week, the small room overwhelming her thoughts. It had made it harder to fall asleep the past few nights and was now plaguing her again. She rolled over again, reaching to grab her phone from its charger. Great, they were supposed to leave in 4 hours. Giving in to despair, she flopped onto her back with a sigh. She had to do something about this. It was driving her up the wall. She turned her head towards her parents, peacefully snoozing away. Lucky. Thinking about it, she realized that if she was quiet, they probably wouldn't notice if she was gone for 15 minutes. Hell, they didn't notice when she was 10 feet behind them or when a spooky room was ruining her vacation. Mind made up, she silently slid out of her rock-hard bed. She had silently put on some clothes and grabbed the pepper spray her mother insisted on giving her, a room key, and her phone. But now she found herself pausing with her hand on the lock. This was ridiculous. It was the middle of the night, and she was freaking out over some empty room. She should just go back to bed and get the few hours of rest she had left. But she slowly turned the lock until it settled with a near-silent click. Too late to turn back now. As she made her way towards the elevator, her uneasiness multiplied by 10. Usually there were at least 2 families with small children bustling down the hall, on their way to or from their latest adventure. But right now, it was just her. Despite the emptiness, the place was just as bright as it was during the day. Most buildings turned the lights off when it was empty of people, but not hotels. Sure, the darkness would have been unnerving, but somehow being able to see the ugly interior decoration was far worse. It made her feel like she was somewhere otherworldly, artificial. She stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the room's floor, wondering what she would find there. Probably just dust and forms abandoned in drawers. But it didn't really matter. All she knew was that if she didn't find out, it would bother her for the rest of her life. When the door slid open with a gentle ding, she noticed one of the lights down the hall was flickering. Oh, that was fantastic. A horror movie set was just what she needed tonight. She began to cautiously shuffle past the other doors, the journey seeming to take an eternity. Finally, she was standing in front of it. The door was open the same amount as when she first saw it. It was enough to peer in, but not to slip through. She placed her hand on the wood, gently pushing on it as it slid across the carpet with a shh. It was even dimmer tonight, not even a crack in the blinds of the lone window. The few pieces of furniture were in the same places, and there was a stillness she could practically grasp. She pulled her phone out of her pocket, tapping the button to turn on its pure white flashlight. It swept back and forth as she stepped into the room, illuminating each nook and cranny. So far, she hadn't seen anything new or scary, but that didn't stop a chill from clawing up her spine. She made her way towards a desk, swiping dust off its chair before sitting down. There was nothing on top, so she pulled open a drawer. As expected, there was a stack of papers, along with some lonely office supplies. She picked up the pages, struggling to shuffle through them with one hand and hold her phone with the other. If there was an award for most average and boring paperwork, she'd give it to this desk. She searched the desk's other drawer and found it to be the same. After repeating the process with the other two desks in the room and getting similar results, she paused to think. Gently twisting back and forth in a chair, she felt like she should be relieved. The most interesting thing she had found was a startled spider. It hadn't scared her, though. She was totally cool with arachnids. But it felt like she was missing something. Something she was supposed to see or find. Maybe she just didn't want to feel like she had ruined her entire vacation thinking about an empty room. Just as she was standing up to face the door and leave in surrender, something caught her eye. She turned her phone's beam towards the right wall, discovering the double doors of what might be a closet. How had she missed that? As she made her way over, she realized they made no sense. There was an entrance to another room in the hall right where this wall was. Maybe the two rooms were connected? It got weirder when she spotted something on the wall next to the doors. It looked like someone had torn off the words labeling another door, rearranged them, and pasted them here. They were now labeled as lost and found. Remembering the missing plaque from the entrance to this room, she shivered. This must be them. After taking a deep breath, she quickly turned one of the handles. She'd had enough hesitation for one night, and this had to be what she was looking for. She expected to see a room big enough to match the door she had seen in the hallway, lit only by what could sneak its way under the crack. But she was faced with an unending darkness, barely sliced by her light. She blew out a shocked puff of breath, surprised to see it condense into a small cloud. She began to turn to scramble away because no way was she doing this. But she was stopped by a soft whisper. "They won't miss you," it said in the tiniest voice. "No one notices you're there, and they never will. But I do, and I understand. They never saw me, but you have dreams, worries, cares. I will listen to them and give you the love you've always wanted." She didn't know when they had started, but there were rivers silently trailing down her face as she turned back towards the darkness. She had finally found it, what she had been searching for as long as she could remember. She stepped into its warm embrace. Cassidy paced around the hideous lobby as she waited for her parents to finish bickering about the room arrangements. They argued enough as it was. Hotel issues were the last thing they needed. It felt like she had been staring at the tropical-themed paintings, an odd choice for a hotel miles away from any beaches, for hours. The noise of her parents wasn't helped by another couple at the front desk, the woman sobbing incomprehensibly and the man shouting angrily. She felt bad for them. It was obvious something awful was going on. but the noise was wearing her patience thinner than paper. Finally, she decided she'd had enough and wandered into an adjacent hallway. Her parents would call her when they realized she wasn't there to help unpack the car. As she strode over the terrible carpet, she looked at the doors that lined the walls. They were all bland, either closed or occupied by some bored-looking employee who didn't pay her any mind. Until she came upon the room. It wasn't anything crazy, except that its label was missing, and the door was wide open, revealing it to be mostly empty. But something about it bothered her. What was that whispering?